The air in the first-class cabin of the flight from Chicago to Dallas was thick with tension, as if the very atmosphere crackled with the weight of an impending storm. Melissa, the lead flight attendant, stood over Jonathan Roumie. Her eyes locked on him with a steely resolve. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remove that necklace or tuck it under your shirt," she said, her voice sharp, pointing at the simple wooden cross hanging from a leather cord around his neck. Passengers glanced up from their pre-flight routines, startled by the unexpected confrontation in the usually serene first-class section. Jonathan, known for portraying Jesus in The Chosen, touched the cross lightly, his expression a mix of surprise and disbelief. 7 words from him would soon leave Melissa stunned, silencing the entire cabin. What were those words? Why would they make her regret her actions? This is the story of a clash between unwavering faith and personal prejudice. A moment that changed everything. Can you guess what Jonathan said to shake the skies? Keep reading to find out. That morning, Jonathan had arrived at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, dressed simply in a navy button-down shirt, jeans, and comfortable travel shoes. His neatly trimmed beard and casually styled dark brown hair gave no hint of his status as a star. The wooden cross around his neck was the only standout, a humble symbol that carried deep meaning, having been with him through his journey of faith and his career-defining role as Jesus in The Chosen. As he passed through security, a few fans recognized him, asking for quick photos or sharing how the show had touched their lives. Jonathan smiled warmly, thanked them sincerely, and moved on to the first-class lounge, hoping to catch up on emails before his flight. The flight to Dallas was for a promotional event for The Chosen, a crowd-funded series that brought Jesus' story to millions worldwide. In the lounge, Jonathan sipped coffee, checking messages from his manager about last-minute schedule changes. He had no idea this flight would test his faith in ways he never expected. When the boarding call came, he joined the first-class line, ticket in hand. The gate agent, recognizing him, smiled and mentioned her family loved watching The Chosen every week. Jonathan thanked her, his genuine humility making the interaction feel personal, not performative. On board, Jonathan settled into his window seat in row 3 of first class, stowing his carry-on and pulling out a book. Other passengers filed in, the cabin humming with the usual pre-flight chatter as flight attendants offered drinks. Melissa, the lead flight attendant with 15 years at the airline, prided herself on professionalism. As she passed Jonathan, her eyes caught the wooden cross, a fleeting look of disapproval crossing her face. Jonathan, absorbed in his book, didn't notice, but the moment marked the start of an unexpected storm. 20 minutes later, as boarding neared completion and the plane prepared for takeoff, Melissa returned to Jonathan's seat. "Sir," she said, her voice low but firm, "I need to talk to you about that religious necklace you're wearing." Jonathan looked up, caught off guard. "My cross?" he asked, touching the leather cord. "Is something wrong with it?" His question was genuine through countless flights. No one had ever questioned the cross. Melissa maintained a professional smile, but her eyes betrayed tension. Our airline strives to create a comfortable environment for all passengers. Some may find religious symbols unsettling, especially in first class. Jonathan set his book down, meeting her gaze. "I appreciate your concern," he said, his voice calm but steady. "But this cross is an expression of my faith. I've worn it on dozens of flights without issue. Can you show me the airline policy that prohibits visible religious symbols?" His question was respectful, not confrontational, but it put Melissa on the spot. Passengers nearby began to notice, a businessman across the aisle pausing his magazine, 2 women in front stopping their conversation, their eyes turning to row 3. Melissa stood taller, her tone sharpening. It's part of our general policy to maintain a neutral environment, she said, but her words lacked confidence. We have the authority to ask passengers to keep religious symbols discreet to avoid discomfort. Jonathan took a deep breath, keeping his composure. Has anyone specifically complained about my cross, or are you assuming it might cause discomfort? His question was gentle but pointed, exposing the vagueness of her stance. Melissa glanced around the cabin, but no passenger seemed bothered except her. The tension in the cabin grew heavy. A middle-aged woman with short gray hair, seated a few rows ahead, spoke up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm. "I fly this airline monthly and have never heard of a policy against religious symbols. I'm wearing a cross under my blouse." "Should I be worried?" Melissa turned, startled by the interruption. "Ma'am, I'm addressing this passenger's situation," she replied, struggling to maintain her professional tone. But her inconsistency was clear, and passengers began to whisper among themselves. Jonathan looked at Melissa, his voice still calm. "It feels like you're singling me out. If religious symbols are the issue, shouldn't you address all passengers wearing them?" His logic was undeniable, and Melissa stiffened, her composure fraying. Another flight attendant, Sarah, approached, her expression concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Melissa," she asked, glancing at Jonathan. Before Melissa could respond, a man in the row behind spoke up. "Hold on. Aren't you Jonathan Roumie from The Chosen? My wife and I watch your show every week." The recognition sent a ripple through the cabin, passengers turning to look at Jonathan, realizing the man asked to hide his cross was the one who played Jesus. Jonathan gave a slight smile, nodding. "Yes, that's me," he said, but quickly refocused. "But regardless of who I am, asking someone to hide a symbol of their faith raises questions about respect and religious freedom." Sarah glanced at Melissa, her eyes signaling worry. "Melissa, let's talk for a moment," she said, gesturing toward the galley. Melissa hesitated, then nodded, following Sarah, leaving Jonathan amid curious and supportive glances from passengers. The tension lingered. The woman with gray hair shook her head, speaking to Jonathan. "I can't believe she asked you to hide your cross. I've flown for 40 years and never seen this." Jonathan smiled gratefully, though his eyes betrayed a hint of strain. The man who recognized him, David, leaned across the aisle, offering his hand. "I'm David Henderson. My family loves your Jesus. The irony of asking the guy who plays him to hide a cross is wild." Jonathan shook his hand, thanking him, but clearly working to stay calm in the face of this unexpected challenge. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight buzzed with a charged undercurrent, the tension from Melissa's confrontation with Jonathan Roumie lingering like static before a lightning strike. Jonathan, the man who portrayed Jesus in The Chosen, sat calmly in his window seat in row 3, his wooden cross still hanging visibly from its leather cord, untouched despite Melissa's demand to hide it. Her abrupt departure to the galley with Sarah, the younger flight attendant, left a wake of whispers among the passengers. Eyes darted between Jonathan and the galley, where Melissa's silhouette was visible, her posture rigid as she spoke in hushed tones. The businessman across the aisle, Michael, lowered his magazine, no longer pretending to read, while the woman with gray hair, Dr. Eleanor Simmons, shook her head in disbelief. Jonathan's 7 words yet to be spoken would soon turn this clash into a moment no one could forget. What would he say to shift the tide? The storm was just beginning. Jonathan took a deep breath, his fingers brushing the cross as he glanced out the window at the tarmac below. The cabin's hum of pre-flight activity, passengers settling in. Flight attendants offering drinks felt distant, overshadowed by the weight of the moment. He wasn't angry, but the confrontation had stirred something deep within him, a resolve to stand firm without losing the compassion that defined his faith. The recognition from David Henderson, the passenger behind him, had shifted the cabin's dynamic, with more passengers now whispering about the chosen and the irony of targeting its star over a cross. In the galley, Melissa's conversation with Sarah grew heated, though their voices were too low to carry. Sarah's hands gestured toward Jonathan's seat, her expression a mix of concern and urgency. Melissa stood with arms crossed, her professional mask slipping as she defended her stance. The captain, a tall man with graying hair named Wilson, emerged from the cockpit, drawn by the escalating situation. He listened briefly, his face unreadable, then nodded, signaling for Melissa to stay put as he made his way down the aisle toward row 3. Passengers watched, their curiosity palpable, sensing the drama was far from over. Jonathan noticed the captain's approach, closing his book and sitting up straighter. "Mr. Roumie," Captain Wilson began, his voice calm but authoritative, extending a hand. "I'm Captain Wilson. I understand there's been a misunderstanding about your necklace." Jonathan shook his hand, his expression respectful but steady. "Yes, sir," he said. "I was asked to remove or hide my cross, and I'm trying to understand which policy requires that." His tone was measured, echoing the gentle dignity he'd shown throughout, but his question cut to the heart of the issue. Captain Wilson glanced at the wooden cross, then met Jonathan's eyes. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice carrying enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Our airline has no policy prohibiting religious symbols. We respect all passengers' right to express their faith." A ripple of relief passed through the cabin, passengers nodding in approval. Dr. Eleanor Simmons gave a quiet, "Well, thank goodness," while Michael across the aisle exhaled audibly. Melissa, standing at the galley's edge, stiffened, her face a mix of embarrassment and defiance as her stance was publicly corrected. Jonathan nodded, his gratitude genuine. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "I didn't want to cause any trouble, but this cross is a core part of my faith." The cross caught the cabin's light, its simplicity a stark contrast to the tension it had sparked. Captain Wilson's expression softened, a hint of recognition in his eyes. No trouble at all. "Mr. Roumie, we're glad you're with us." He turned to the cabin, his voice shifting to routine authority. "Folks, we'll push back from the gate in a few minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts." With that, he headed back to the cockpit, pausing briefly to speak to Melissa in a low voice, her nod tight and strained. Sarah approached Jonathan's seat, her smile apologetic. "Mr. Roumie, I'm so sorry for any discomfort," she said softly. "Can I get you anything?" Her warmth stood in sharp contrast to Melissa's earlier rigidity. "Water would be fine, thank you," Jonathan replied, his graciousness easing the moment's edge. Sarah returned with a bottle, placing it on his armrest with another quiet apology before moving on. Melissa, however, stayed in the galley, her movements mechanical as she prepared the drink cart, avoiding eye contact with passengers. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the cabin settled into the familiar rhythm of takeoff, but an undercurrent of awareness remained. Passengers stole glances at Jonathan, some offering subtle nods of support, others whispering about the confrontation. Jonathan reopened his book, but his focus wavered, the adrenaline from the exchange making the words blur. His hand drifted to the cross, a grounding gesture, as he processed the challenge to his faith. The empty seat beside him offered a small buffer, letting him reflect without immediate company. The plane climbed through the clouds, the seatbelt sign dinging off as it reached cruising altitude. Passengers reclined seats or pulled out devices. But the earlier drama lingered. Sarah began drink service, her smile warm for each passenger. When she reached Jonathan, she leaned in slightly. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm okay. Thank you," he said, accepting a sparkling water. "It's resolved now." His calm response eased her concern, though she glanced toward the galley, where Melissa worked with a strained expression. "Not everyone shares Melissa's view," Sarah said carefully. "Many of us have faith too. Your show means a lot to my family." By the way, Jonathan's face brightened, a genuine smile breaking through. "That's wonderful to hear," he said. "It's a privilege to bring those stories to life." Their brief exchange offered a moment of connection, a counterpoint to the earlier tension. As Sarah moved on, Michael across the aisle leaned over. "I'm not religious," he said, "but that didn't sit right with me. You handled it well." Jonathan nodded, shaking Michael's hand. "It's about respect for everyone's beliefs," he said, sparking a quiet conversation that bridged their differences. In the galley, Melissa's composure was fraying. Her movements were stiff, her eyes avoiding passengers as she arranged the meal cart. Sarah worked beside her, handling requests with ease, subtly covering for Melissa's emotional distance. A soft chime from the intercom announced Captain Wilson's voice, detailing the flight path and arrival time in Dallas. The routine brought a semblance of normalcy, but glances toward Jonathan and Melissa kept the incident alive in passengers' minds. As meal service began, Melissa approached Jonathan's row with the cart, her expression tight. Their eyes met briefly, and she placed his tray down without a word, her gaze avoiding the cross. "Thank you," Jonathan said politely, but she was already moving on. Her silence a stark contrast to Sarah's warmth. Passengers noticed, some exchanging looks, others whispering about Melissa's demeanor. Jonathan ate quietly, occasionally chatting with Michael, but his thoughts lingered on the confrontation, sensing it wasn't fully resolved. Mid-flight, a new twist emerged. A young woman, passing Jonathan's seat on her way to the lavatory, paused, her eyes widening. "You're Jonathan Roumie, aren't you?" she said, her voice hushed but excited. "I'm a huge fan of The Chosen. I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. I recorded it on my phone. Everyone's talking about it online already." Jonathan blinked, caught off guard. "Online?" he asked, a flicker of concern crossing his face. The woman nodded, showing him her phone, where a clip of Melissa's demand was gaining traction. Captioned, "Flight attendant tells Jesus actor to hide cross." The cabin's tension spiked anew, passengers whispering as the story began to spread beyond the skies. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight hummed with an electric tension. The earlier confrontation between Jonathan Roumie and flight attendant Melissa now rippling beyond the plane. Jonathan, the actor known for portraying Jesus in The Chosen, sat in his window seat in row 3, his wooden cross still visible against his navy button-down shirt, a quiet testament to his unyielding faith. The revelation that a passenger had recorded the incident and shared it online, captioned, "Flight attendant tells Jesus actor to hide cross," had sent whispers through the cabin, with passengers stealing glances at Jonathan and checking their phones. Melissa, isolated in the galley, moved stiffly, her professional facade fraying under the weight of her misstep. Captain Wilson's clarification that no airline policy banned religious symbols had diffused the immediate conflict. But the viral clip was igniting a storm far beyond the skies. Jonathan's 7 words, "yet to come," would soon turn this moment into something unforgettable. What would he say to shift the narrative? The spark was about to catch fire. Jonathan leaned back in his seat. His book closed on his lap, his fingers brushing the wooden cross as he processed the news of the viral clip. The young woman who had shown him the video, a college student named Rachel with long braided hair, lingered nearby, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "It's already got thousands of views," she said, her voice low but urgent, showing him her phone again. The clip, grainy but clear, captured Melissa's demand and Jonathan's calm response, with comments flooding in. "This is outrageous. He's so graceful. Where's the airline's apology?" Jonathan's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He hadn't wanted this to become a spectacle, but the story was taking on a life of its own. Across the aisle, Michael Chin, the tech executive, leaned over, his eyes on Rachel's phone. "That's blowing up fast," he said, shaking his head. "You okay with this going public?" Jonathan. His tone was supportive, but curious. Sensing the weight of the moment, Jonathan gave a small smile, his voice steady. "I didn't expect this. But if it sparks a conversation about faith and respect, maybe that's not a bad thing." His words were measured, reflecting the same calm dignity that had carried him through the confrontation. But his eyes betrayed a hint of concern for how the narrative might spiral. In the galley, Melissa's movements were mechanical, her hands arranging the meal cart with forced precision. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, worked beside her, her warmth a stark contrast to Melissa's strained silence. Passengers' whispers reached the galley, snippets of viral video and cross necklace floating through the air. Melissa's face tightened, her eyes avoiding Sarah's as she grappled with the growing fallout. She hadn't anticipated her request would be recorded, let alone shared with the world, and the realization was unraveling her composure. Sarah glanced at her, concern etching her features, but said nothing, sensing Melissa's need for space. The cabin's atmosphere was charged, passengers now openly discussing the incident. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor with short gray hair, turned in her seat, addressing Jonathan. "This is why I stopped flying as often," she said, her voice carrying authority. "People in charge sometimes make up rules to suit their own biases. You handled it with grace, young man." Jonathan nodded, his smile grateful but restrained. "Thank you, Dr. Simmons," he said. "I just want to stay true to what I believe without causing a scene." His humility only deepened the passengers' respect, their nods and murmurs signaling growing support. As the meal service continued, Sarah moved through the cabin, her smile warm for each passenger. When she reached Jonathan, she leaned in, her voice low. "I'm so sorry this is turning into a circus," she said, handing him a fresh water. "Some of us are rooting for you." Jonathan's face softened, his eyes meeting hers. "That means a lot. Sarah, I'm just trying to keep the focus on what matters." Their exchange was brief but genuine, a moment of connection amid the storm. Sarah glanced toward the galley, where Melissa was still avoiding eye contact, her movements betraying her unease. The plane cruised steadily over the Midwest, the hum of the engines a backdrop to the cabin's restless energy. Passengers checked their phones, the viral clip now trending with hashtags like "Or Faith on Flight" and "Jonathan Roumie." Comments poured in, some praising Jonathan's composure, others demanding accountability from the airline. Rachel, the student who had shown him the clip, scrolled through her phone, her eyes wide. "People are saying you're a hero for standing up," she told Jonathan, her voice hushed with awe. "They're calling for the airline to apologize." Jonathan shook his head slightly, his expression thoughtful. "I'm no hero," he said. "I just believe faith should be respected, not hidden." Michael leaned over again, his tone serious. "This could get big, Jonathan. The internet doesn't forget. You sure you're ready for the spotlight?" Jonathan's fingers brushed the cross again, a grounding gesture. "I've been in the spotlight before," he said, referencing his role in The Chosen. "But this isn't about me. It's about standing for something bigger." His words carried a quiet conviction, drawing nods from nearby passengers who overheard. The cabin's energy shifted, a sense of solidarity forming around the man who refused to hide his faith. Then, a new twist jolted the cabin. Sarah approached Jonathan's seat, her face a mix of excitement and urgency, holding a tablet. "Mr. Roumie, you need to see this," she said, her voice low but insistent. She showed him a live feed from a news outlet, already covering the incident. A headline flashed, "The Chosen." Star confronted over cross on flight. The report included passenger tweets and a clip of Jonathan's calm response, with a pundit praising his grace under pressure. Jonathan's eyes widened, the scale of the situation sinking in. "This is happening fast," he murmured, his voice steady but tinged with concern. Passengers around him leaned in, catching glimpses of the tablet. "Doctor," Simmons shook her head, her voice sharp. "The media's going to eat this up," she said. "You've got a platform now. Jonathan, whether you wanted it or not." Her words were both a warning and an encouragement, recognizing the moment's potential. Jonathan nodded, his fingers still on the cross. "If this opens a door to talk about faith, I'll walk through it," he said, his voice firm but humble. "But I don't want it to be about shaming anyone." In the galley, Melissa overheard Sarah's exchange with Jonathan, her face paling as she caught the word news. She stepped out, her movements hesitant, and approached Jonathan's row, her clipboard clutched tightly. "Mr. Roumie," she said, her voice strained but professional. I didn't know this would go online." Her eyes avoided the cross, her posture tense with the weight of her mistake. Jonathan looked up, his expression calm but direct. "I didn't either, Melissa," he said. "But maybe this is a chance for all of us to think about what respect looks like." His words were gentle, but they carried a challenge, a call to reflect rather than react. Melissa stood frozen, her professional mask cracking as the reality of the viral storm hit her. Passengers watched, some with disapproval, others with curiosity, sensing the confrontation was far from over. Sarah hovered nearby, her expression conflicted, wanting to support both her colleague and the passenger she admired. The cabin's energy was electric, every eye on Jonathan and Melissa, waiting for the next move. Would Melissa double down? Or would Jonathan's words spark a change? The plane soared on, but the story was just beginning to take flight. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight crackled with unspoken tension. The viral clip of Jonathan Roumie's confrontation over his wooden cross now spreading like wildfire online. Jonathan, the actor known for portraying Jesus in The Chosen, sat in his window seat in row 3, his navy button-down shirt framing the simple cross that had sparked the storm. His calm response to Melissa's demand to hide it had resonated with passengers and viewers alike, with hashtags like #FaithOnFlight trending across social media. Melissa, the lead flight attendant, stood at the galley's edge, her face pale as she grappled with the fallout of her actions, her professional mask crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Passengers whispered, their phones buzzing with updates, as the cabin felt the pulse of a moment growing beyond control. Jonathan's 7 words still unspoken loomed, ready to shift the narrative in ways no one could predict. Would they break through Melissa's defenses, or deepen the divide? Jonathan leaned back, his fingers brushing the cross as he glanced out at the clouds below. The news report Sarah had shown him a headline blaring, "The Chosen." Star confronted over cross on flight played in his mind, its reach far beyond the cabin. He hadn't sought this attention, but the weight of the moment pressed on him, a call to stand firm without losing compassion. Rachel, the college student who'd shared the viral clip, sat a few rows back, scrolling her phone, her expression a mix of awe and worry. "It's hit 1 million views," she whispered to her seatmate, her voice carrying to Jonathan. He gave a small nod, his face thoughtful, sensing the story was no longer just his. Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, leaned over, his voice low. "This is getting huge. Jonathan, you're handling it like a saint, but the internet's ruthless. You sure you're okay?" Jonathan's smile was steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. "I didn't want a spectacle," he said, "but if this opens a door to talk about faith and respect, I'll walk through it." His words carried the quiet conviction that had drawn millions to his portrayal of Jesus, and Michael nodded, impressed by his resolve. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, chimed in from a few rows ahead. "You're a voice for many now," she said, her tone firm. "Don't let this shake you." In the galley, Melissa's hands trembled as she arranged coffee cups, her movements mechanical. Sarah worked beside her, her warmth a silent contrast to Melissa's strained silence. The whispers of viral video and cross-controversy reached them, each word a jab at Melissa's composure. She'd overheard Sarah's exchange with Jonathan about the news coverage, and the reality of her mistake was sinking in. Her demand, meant to maintain a neutral environment, had backfired, exposing her bias to the world. Sarah glanced at her, her expression soft but concerned. "You okay, Melissa?" she asked quietly. Melissa nodded stiffly, avoiding her gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. The cabin's energy was electric, passengers now openly discussing the incident. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, pulled out his phone, showing his seatmate a tweet. "This airline owes a Jonathan Roumie an apology." Faith on flight. The buzz grew louder, with some passengers nodding in agreement, others typing furiously on their devices. Rachel leaned forward, her voice hushed but excited. "People are starting petitions online," she told Jonathan. "They want the airline to make a statement." Jonathan's brow furrowed, his fingers brushing the cross again. "I don't want this to be about punishment," he said softly. "I want it to be about understanding." As the flight continued, Sarah moved through the cabin, her smile warm but tinged with worry. When she reached Jonathan, she paused, her voice low. "The crew's getting messages from the airline," she said. "They're aware of the video and want to talk to you when we land. Just a heads up." Jonathan nodded, his expression calm but alert. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll handle it as it comes." His graciousness eased her tension, and she moved on, glancing back at the galley where Melissa stood, her face a mask of distress. Then, a new twist shook the cabin. A soft chime sounded from Rachel's phone, and she gasped, her eyes wide. "Jonathan, you need to see this," she said, hurrying to his seat. She showed him a live stream from a Dallas news station, already waiting at the airport. A reporter stood at the gate, microphone in hand, saying, "We're here to cover the story of Jonathan Roumie, star of The Chosen, who faced a challenge to his faith on a flight today. Fans are gathering, demanding answers." The camera panned to a small crowd holding signs, "Faith is freedom and stand with Jonathan." Jonathan's eyes widened, the scale of the moment hitting him. "They're at the airport," he murmured, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Passengers around him leaned in, catching glimpses of the stream. Michael shook his head, his tone a mix of admiration and concern. "You've got a movement on your hands, man. This is bigger than the plane now. Dr. Simmons turned in her seat, her voice sharp but supportive. This is what happens when you stand for something real. People rally behind truth. Her words were a challenge, urging Jonathan to embrace the moment, but his expression remained thoughtful, his fingers still on the cross as he weighed the responsibility. Melissa, overhearing Rachel's excitement, stepped out of the galley, her clipboard clutched tightly. Her face was pale, her eyes darting to Jonathan's seat. "Mr. Roumie," she said, her voice trembling but professional. "I didn't mean for this to go so far." Her admission was raw, a crack in her defenses, and passengers turned to listen, sensing a shift. Jonathan looked up, his gaze calm but direct. "I know, Melissa," he said, "but this isn't just about you or me anymore. It's about what we stand for." His words were gentle but pointed, a call to reflect on the deeper issues at play. The cabin fell silent, every eye on Melissa as she stood, exposed and vulnerable. Sarah hovered nearby, her expression torn between loyalty to her colleague and admiration for Jonathan. Passengers whispered, some with disapproval toward Melissa, others with curiosity about her next move. The news stream on Rachel's phone continued, the reporter's voice audible. "Fans are calling this a stand for religious freedom. Will the airline respond?" The tension was palpable. The cabin a microcosm of a larger battle unfolding in real time. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Melissa, I don't want this to be about tearing anyone down," he said. "But faith isn't something to hide. It's something to live." His words carried the weight of his conviction, a quiet challenge that echoed his portrayal of Jesus. Melissa's eyes flickered with emotion, her hands tightening on the clipboard. Would she push back? Or would Jonathan's compassion crack her defenses? The plane soared on, but the story was climbing to new heights. With the world watching and waiting, the first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight thrummed with a restless energy, the viral storm surrounding Jonathan Roumie's confrontation over his wooden cross now raging beyond the plane's walls. Jonathan, the actor who brought Jesus to life in The Chosen, sat in his window seat in row 3, his navy button-down shirt framing the simple cross that had ignited a global conversation. The news of fans gathering at Dallas Airport, holding signs like "Faith is Freedom," and the live news stream covering the incident had electrified the cabin, with passengers whispering and checking their phones. Melissa, the lead flight attendant, stood frozen after her hesitant admission to Jonathan, her clipboard trembling in her hands as the weight of her mistake bore down. The cabin watched, breathless, as Jonathan's 7 words still unspoken loomed, ready to reshape this moment. Would they pierce Melissa's defenses, or would the viral fire consume them all? Jonathan leaned back, his fingers brushing the cross, his gaze steady despite the chaos unfolding. The live stream Rachel had shown him a Dallas reporter detailing the growing crowd at the airport played in his mind. The signs and chants a testament to the moment's impact. He hadn't sought this spotlight, but he felt a quiet resolve to steer it toward truth, not division. Rachel, the college student, sat a few rows back, her phone still open to the stream, her eyes wide with excitement. "They're chanting your name, Jonathan," she whispered, leaning forward. "This is huge." Jonathan gave a small smile, his voice calm. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about what this stands for." He touched the cross, grounding himself in its meaning. Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, shook his head, his tone a mix of awe and caution. "You're trending worldwide, man," he said, showing his phone with Faith on flight posts flooding social media. "This could make or break someone's career. You're holding up like a rock." Jonathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I just want to honor my faith without hurting anyone," he said, his words echoing the compassion that defined his portrayal of Jesus. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, turned in her seat, her voice firm. "You're doing more than holding up," she said. "You're showing what it means to stand for something real." In the galley, Melissa's composure was in tatters. Her hands fumbled with a tray, her eyes darting to the cabin where passengers whispered about the viral clip. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, worked beside her, her warmth a silent support. But the weight of Melissa's actions was isolating her. She'd overheard Rachel's update about the airport crowd, and the news coverage's sting was unbearable. Her demand to hide Jonathan's cross, meant to enforce a neutral space, had exposed her bias to millions. Sarah touched her arm gently. "Melissa, talk to him again," she urged, her voice low. "You can fix this." Melissa shook her head, her lips tight, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The cabin's energy was electric, passengers now openly engaged with the unfolding drama. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, leaned forward, his phone showing a petition with thousands of signatures demanding an airline apology. "This is blowing up," he told his seatmate, his voice carrying to Jonathan. "People are calling it a stand for religious freedom." Rachel nodded, her eyes on her phone. "There's a hashtag now." "Stand with Jonathan," she said, showing him a post with a photo of his cross, captioned "Faith shouldn't be silenced." Jonathan's brow furrowed, his fingers brushing the cross again. "I don't want this to be a fight," he said softly. "I want it to be a bridge." As the plane began its descent toward Dallas, the cabin's tension spiked. Sarah moved through the aisle, collecting trays. Her smile strained as she glanced at Melissa, who remained in the galley, avoiding the passengers' gazes. When Sarah reached Jonathan, she paused, her voice low. "The airline's PR team will meet us at the gate," she said. "They're preparing a statement, but they want to talk to you first." Jonathan nodded, his expression calm but alert. "I'll speak with them," he said. "But I want this to stay about respect, not revenge." His words eased her worry, and she moved on, her glance back at the galley heavy with concern. Then, a new twist jolted the cabin. A soft chime sounded from Michael's phone, and he gasped, his eyes wide. "Jonathan, look at this," he said, leaning across the aisle. He showed a breaking news alert. Airline CEO addresses The Chosen, Stars Cross controversy. The article quoted the CEO promising a full investigation and an apology if warranted, citing our commitment to diversity. Passengers around them leaned in, catching glimpses of the alert. Rachel's eyes widened. "They're responding already," she said, her voice hushed with disbelief. Jonathan read the headline, his expression thoughtful. "This is moving fast," he murmured, his fingers still on the cross. "Dr." Simmons turned, her voice sharp but supportive. "They're covering their tracks," she said. "You forced their hand. Jonathan, that's power." Her words were a call to action, but Jonathan shook his head slightly. "It's not about power," he said. "It's about truth. I want people to see faith as a light, not a weapon." His conviction silenced the nearby passengers, their nods reflecting growing admiration. The cabin's energy shifted, a sense of unity forming around the man who stood firm without malice. Melissa, overhearing Michael's update, stepped out of the galley, her face ashen. She approached Jonathan's row, her clipboard a shield, her voice trembling. "Mr. Roumie, I didn't know it would come to this," she said, her eyes avoiding the cross. "I was just trying to do my job. Her words were raw, a plea for understanding, but they carried the weight of her error. Jonathan looked up, his gaze steady and compassionate. "Melissa, I believe you meant well," he said. "But asking someone to hide their faith isn't neutral, it's taking a side." His words were gentle but piercing, a challenge wrapped in grace. The cabin fell silent, passengers watching as Melissa stood exposed, her defenses crumbling. Sarah hovered nearby, her expression torn, wanting to support her colleague but moved by Jonathan's compassion. Rachel clutched her phone, the news stream still playing. The reporter's voice audible. Fans are demanding accountability. Will the airline make amends? The tension was suffocating, every eye on Melissa as she grappled with Jonathan's words. Her hands tightened on the clipboard, her voice barely audible. I need to think," she said, turning back to the galley, her steps unsteady. Jonathan leaned back, his fingers brushing the cross, his heart heavy but resolute. He hadn't wanted this to become a public trial, but the moment was bigger than him now. Passengers whispered, some typing furiously, others nodding in support. Michael leaned over, his voice low. "You're changing minds out there," he said, "not just hers." Jonathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "If this helps one person see faith differently, it's worth it," he said. His voice steady but tinged with hope. The plane descended toward Dallas, the cabin braced for landing, but the story was soaring to new heights, with the world waiting for what came next. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight vibrated with a charged stillness as the plane neared its descent into Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Jonathan Roumie, the actor renowned for portraying Jesus in The Chosen, sat in his window seat in row 3, his wooden cross a quiet beacon against his navy button-down shirt. The viral storm sparked by Melissa's demand to hide the cross had escalated, with fans rallying at the Dallas airport, news outlets broadcasting live, and the airline's CEO promising an investigation. Passengers whispered, their phones buzzing with updates, as Melissa, the lead flight attendant, retreated to the galley, her composure shattered by Jonathan's gentle challenge. Faith isn't something to hide. It's something to live. The cabin held its breath, sensing Jonathan's 7 words still unspoken would soon reshape this moment. Would they bridge the divide, or would the viral fire consume all involved? Jonathan gazed out at the approaching Dallas skyline, his fingers brushing the cross, his heart steady but heavy with the moment's weight. The news of fans at the airport chanting "Faith is freedom," and the airline CEO's public statement played in his mind, a whirlwind he hadn't sought but couldn't ignore. He wanted this to be a moment of understanding, not division, but the viral clip now viewed by millions was fueling a global conversation. Rachel, the college student who'd shared the video, sat a few rows back, her phone open to a live stream, her voice hushed with awe. "They're showing your picture at the airport. Jonathan," she said, leaning forward. "People are praying for you." Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, leaned over, his tone a mix of respect and concern. "You're a symbol now, whether you like it or not," he said, scrolling through and Stand with Jonathan posts. "How do you stay so calm?" Jonathan's smile was soft, his voice steady. "It's not about staying calm," he said, touching the cross. "It's about staying true. My faith isn't just this necklace, it's how I live." His words echoed the grace of his The Chosen role, drawing nods from nearby passengers. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, turned in her seat, her voice firm. "You're teaching us all something. Jonathan, don't stop now." In the galley, Melissa's hands shook as she stacked trays, her professional mask gone. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, worked beside her, her warmth a silent lifeline. But Melissa was drowning in the fallout. The whispers of viral video and CEO statements stung, each one a reminder of her misstep. She'd overheard Rachel's update about the airport crowd, and the reality of her actions exposed to millions was crushing. Sarah touched her shoulder gently. "Melissa, you can still make this right," she said, her voice low but urgent. Melissa's eyes flickered with doubt, but she shook her head, retreating deeper into silence. The cabin's energy was electric, passengers now fully immersed in the unfolding drama. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, showed his seatmate a petition nearing 50,000 signatures demanding an airline apology. "This is history," he said, his voice carrying to Jonathan. Rachel nodded, her eyes on her phone. "They're calling you a voice for faith," she told Jonathan, showing a post with his cross captioned, "This is what courage looks like." Jonathan's brow furrowed, his voice soft. "Courage isn't standing up," he said. "It's standing up with love." His words silenced nearby passengers, their admiration deepening. As the plane's descent steepened, the seatbelt sign glowed, and Sarah moved through the aisle, checking trays and seats. When she reached Jonathan, she paused, her voice low. "The airline's team is waiting at the gate," she said. "They're nervous about the crowd. Be careful out there." Jonathan nodded, his expression calm but alert. "Thank you. Sarah, I'll keep it about truth, not trouble." His reassurance eased her worry, and she glanced back at the galley, where Melissa stood, her face a mask of anguish. Then, a new twist shook the cabin. A soft chime sounded from Rachel's phone, and she gasped, her eyes wide. "Jonathan, it's your co-star," she said, rushing to his seat. She showed a live video from Noah James, who played Andrew in The Chosen, speaking at the Dallas airport rally. "Jonathan Roumie is my brother in faith," Noah said, his voice passionate. "He stood for what's right, and we're here to stand with him." The crowd cheered, signs waving, as the camera panned to a sea of faces. Jonathan's eyes widened, a mix of gratitude and responsibility washing over him. "Noah's there," he murmured, his voice steady but moved. Passengers leaned in, catching glimpses of the video. Michael shook his head, his tone awed. "Your whole cast is backing you," he said. "This is bigger than a flight now." "Dr." Simmons turned, her voice sharp but encouraging. "You've lit a spark. Jonathan, it's spreading." Her words were a call to embrace the moment, but Jonathan's fingers brushed the cross, his expression thoughtful. "I just want it to spread light, not heat," he said, his conviction resonating through the cabin. Melissa, overhearing Rachel's update, stepped out of the galley, her clipboard forgotten, her face pale with realization. She approached Jonathan's row, her voice trembling. "Mr. Roumie, I didn't know it would go this far," she said, her eyes avoiding the cross. "I thought I was doing my job, but I was wrong." Her admission was raw, a crack in her armor, and passengers turned to listen, sensing a turning point. Jonathan looked up, his gaze compassionate but unwavering. "Melissa, mistakes happen," he said, "but it's what we do next that matters. You can choose to see faith differently now." The cabin fell silent, passengers watching as Melissa stood, her defenses crumbling under Jonathan's grace. Sarah stood nearby, her eyes glistening, moved by the exchange. Rachel clutched her phone, the live stream still playing. Noah's voice audible. "We're praying for healing, not division." The tension was palpable, every eye on Melissa as she grappled with Jonathan's words. Her hands shook, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, her eyes finally meeting his, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice soft but powerful. You start by being honest, he said. Not with me, but with yourself. Faith isn't a threat, it's a gift. His words were a lifeline, offered with the same love he portrayed in The Chosen. Passengers nodded, some whispering in agreement, others typing furiously, sharing the moment online. Michael leaned over, his voice low. You're giving her a way out, he said, his tone full of respect. Jonathan nodded, his eyes on Melissa. That's what faith does, he said. It builds bridges, not walls. The plane's wheels touched down in Dallas, the cabin jolting slightly as it taxied to the gate. Passengers gathered belongings, but the energy remained electric. Every eye on Jonathan and Melissa. She stood frozen, her hands empty, her face a mix of shame and dawning realization. Sarah approached, her voice gentle. Melissa, let's get ready for deplaning, she said, guiding her back to the galley. The cabin buzzed, passengers whispering about the airport crowd, the CEO's statement, and Jonathan's unwavering grace. Would Melissa take the lifeline he offered? Or would the viral storm sweep her away the plane had landed? But the story was still soaring. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight was a crucible of emotion as the plane came to a stop at the gate of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Jonathan Roumie, the actor who embodied Jesus in The Chosen, sat in his window seat in row 3, his wooden cross a quiet symbol of the faith that had sparked a viral storm. The confrontation with flight attendant Melissa over hiding the cross had exploded online, with fans rallying at the airport, news outlets broadcasting live, and the airline's CEO promising an investigation. Melissa's raw admission. I don't know how to fix this still hung in the air, her vulnerability exposed before passengers who watched, transfixed. Jonathan's 7 words, yet to be spoken, loomed like a beacon, ready to guide this moment toward healing or deepen the divide. Would Melissa seize the lifeline he offered, or would the weight of her mistake crush her? Jonathan gathered his belongings, his fingers brushing the cross as he glanced out at the tarmac, where news vans and a crowd of supporters waited beyond the gate. The live stream from Noah James, his The Chosen co-star, speaking at the airport rally. We're praying for healing, not division, echoed in his mind, a reminder of the moment's stakes. He hadn't sought this platform, but he felt a quiet call to use it for truth and grace. Rachel, the college student who'd shared the viral clip, stood in the aisle, her phone still open to the stream, her voice hushed with awe. They're waiting for you out there. Jonathan, she said, her eyes wide. It's like a movement. Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, zipped his laptop bag, his tone a mix of admiration and concern. You're walking into a firestorm, he said, glancing at his phone, where Mon Stand with Jonathan trended globally. You sure you're ready? Jonathan's smile was steady, his voice calm. I'm not walking alone, he said, touching the cross. Faith isn't just about standing firm, it's about lifting others up. His words resonated, drawing nods from nearby passengers. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, stood to retrieve her bag, her voice firm. You're a light in this mess. Jonathan, keep shining. In the galley. Melissa stood frozen, her hands empty, her face pale with the weight of her actions. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, worked beside her, her warmth a silent support. But Melissa was unraveling. The news of fans at the airport, the CEO's statement, and Jonathan's compassionate challenge. You can choose to see Faith differently now had stripped her defenses bare. She overheard Rachel's update about the crowd, each word a hammer against her resolve. Sarah touched her arm, her voice gentle. Melissa, say something to him before he leaves, she urged. Melissa's eyes flickered with fear. but she nodded, her lips trembling as she stepped toward the aisle. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, passengers lingering in their seats, sensing the drama's climax. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, whispered to his seatmate, showing a petition now at 100,000 signatures demanding an airline apology. "This is bigger than one flight," he said, his voice carrying. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing. Noah's voice audible. "Jonathan's faith is our faith." Passengers nodded, some typing furiously, others watching Melissa's hesitant approach, their eyes reflecting a mix of judgment and curiosity. As deplaning began, Jonathan stood, slinging his carry-on over his shoulder, his expression calm but alert. Melissa approached his row, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Roumie, can I speak with you?" she asked, her eyes finally meeting his, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through. Passengers paused, their movements slowing as they watched, sensing a pivotal moment. Jonathan nodded, his gaze compassionate. "Of course. Melissa," he said, stepping into the aisle to face her, his presence steady despite the chaos beyond the gate. The cabin fell silent, the hum of the plane's systems the only sound. Melissa took a shaky breath, her hands twisting together. "I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I let my own issues, my past, cloud how I treated you. I'm sorry." Her admission was raw, a public reckoning that stunned the passengers. Rachel's eyes widened, her phone still recording, capturing the moment. Michael leaned forward, his expression softening, while Dr. Simmons nodded quietly, her approval evident. Jonathan's face softened, his voice gentle but powerful. "Thank you, Melissa," he said. "That took courage. Faith can stir up pain, but it can also heal it." His words were a lifeline, offered with the grace that defined the chosen role. He touched the cross, his gesture unconscious but meaningful. "I don't hold this against you. I hope you find what this means to me." The cabin was electric, passengers whispering, some nodding in awe, others typing to share the moment online. Then, a new twist shook the scene. Sarah stepped forward, her face alight with urgency, holding a tablet. "Jonathan, Melissa, you need to see this," she said, her voice low but insistent. She showed a breaking news alert. Airline issues apology to Jonathan Roumie, promises policy review. The statement cited an error in judgment and thanked Jonathan for his grace under pressure. Passengers gasped, leaning in to see the tablet. Rachel's eyes widened. "They're apologizing already," she said, her voice hushed with disbelief. Jonathan read the statement, his expression thoughtful, while Melissa's face crumpled, a mix of relief and shame washing over her. Michael shook his head, his tone awed. "You got them to move fast," he said to Jonathan. "That's rare." Dr. Simmons turned, her voice sharp but supportive. "This is your doing, Jonathan. You forced truth to the surface." Her words were a call to recognize the moment's impact, but Jonathan's fingers brushed the cross, his voice soft. "It's not my doing," he said. "It's what faith can do when we live it with love." His conviction silenced the cabin, passengers nodding, their admiration deepening. Melissa stood, her hands empty, her eyes locked on Jonathan. "I don't deserve your kindness," she said, her voice breaking, "but I want to understand what you mean by faith." Her words were a plea, a step towards something new, and passengers watched, breathless, sensing a transformation. Jonathan smiled, his voice warm. "That's a start, Melissa," he said. "Faith isn't about rules, it's about relationship. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." His offer was genuine. A bridge extended despite the pain her actions had caused. The cabin erupted in soft applause, passengers clapping quietly, their faces reflecting hope and awe. Rachel clutched her phone. The stream still playing, the crowd at the airport cheering as news of the apology broke. Sarah's eyes glistened, her hand on Melissa's shoulder, guiding her back to the galley as deplaning continued. Passengers gathered belongings, but the energy remained electric, every eye on Jonathan as he prepared to face the crowd beyond the gate. Would Melissa embrace this new path? Or would the viral storm pull her back? The plane had landed, but the story was soaring to new heights, with the world waiting for Jonathan's next step. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight was a crucible of hope as passengers began to deplane at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Jonathan Roumie, the actor who portrayed Jesus in The Chosen, stood in the aisle of row 3, his wooden cross a quiet symbol against his navy button-down shirt, radiating the faith that had sparked a global movement. Melissa's raw apology "I was wrong" and her plea to understand faith had shifted the cabin's energy, with passengers clapping softly, their faces alight with awe. The viral storm, fueled by a clip of Melissa's demand to hide Jonathan's cross, had led to an airline apology and a crowd of supporters waiting at the gate, chanting, "Faith is freedom." Jonathan's 7 words, still unspoken, hung in the air, ready to seal this moment of transformation. Would they build a bridge to healing, or would the weight of the spotlight fracture the fragile connection? Jonathan slung his carry-on over his shoulder, his fingers brushing the cross as he prepared to face the crowd beyond the gate. The airline's public apology, praising his grace under pressure, and the live stream of fans led by his The Chosen co-star Noah James played in his mind, a testament to the moment's reach. He hadn't sought this platform, but he felt a quiet call to use it for unity, not division. Rachel, the college student who'd shared the viral clip, stood nearby, her phone still open to the stream, her voice hushed with excitement. "They're waiting for you." "Jonathan," she said, her eyes wide. "This is bigger than anything I've seen." Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, grabbed his bag, his tone a mix of admiration and caution. "You're walking into a media frenzy," he said, glancing at his phone. Where's our stand with Jonathan posts surged. "You're handling it like it's nothing." Jonathan's smile was steady, his voice calm. "It's not nothing," he said, touching the cross. "It's everything. But it's about lifting others up, not tearing them down." His words resonated, drawing nods from passengers. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, joined them in the aisle, her voice firm. "You're a beacon, Jonathan. Keep leading with truth." In the galley, Melissa stood with Sarah, her hands empty, her face a mix of shame and dawning hope. The passengers' applause for her apology lingered in her ears, a sound she hadn't expected. Sarah's gentle encouragement. "You did the right thing" had steadied her, but the weight of the viral fallout and Jonathan's offer to talk about faith pressed on her heart. She glanced at Jonathan, now standing in the aisle, and felt a flicker of courage. Sarah touched her arm, her voice soft. "Go to him." "Melissa," she said, "this is your chance." Melissa nodded, her lips trembling, and stepped toward the aisle. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, passengers lingering as they gathered belongings, their eyes on Jonathan and Melissa. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, whispered to his seatmate, showing a petition now at 200,000 signatures demanding airline policy reform. "This is changing things," he said, his voice carrying. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing. Noah's voice audible. "We're here for Jonathan, for faith." Passengers nodded, some typing furiously, others watching Melissa's hesitant approach, sensing a moment of reconciliation. Melissa reached Jonathan's row, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Roumie, I meant what I said," she whispered, her eyes meeting his, vulnerable but resolute. "I want to understand what you mean by faith." The cabin fell silent, passengers pausing, their faces reflecting hope and curiosity. Jonathan turned to her, his expression compassionate. "That's a brave step, Melissa," he said, his voice warm. "Faith isn't about rules or hiding. It's about knowing you're loved, no matter what." His words were a lifeline, offered with the grace that defined his the chosen role. Then, a new twist shook the moment. Sarah hurried forward, her face alight with urgency, holding her tablet. "Jonathan, Melissa, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. She showed a breaking news alert. The Chosen. Fans launch global prayer chain for flight attendant. The article detailed how viewers, inspired by Jonathan's grace, were praying for Melissa, with comments flooding in. "She made a mistake, but she's human. Let's lift her up." Passengers gasped, leaning in to see the tablet. Rachel's eyes widened. "They're praying for you, Melissa," she said, her voice hushed with awe. Melissa's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes glistening with emotion. "For me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After what I did." The weight of the moment hit her, the unexpected grace from strangers dismantling her shame. Jonathan smiled, his voice soft but powerful. "That's what faith does." "Melissa," he said. "It doesn't condemn, it restores." His words silenced the cabin, passengers nodding, some whispering in agreement, others typing to share the moment online. Michael leaned over, his tone awed. "You're turning this into something beautiful," he said to Jonathan. "Doctor." Simmons stepped closer, her voice sharp but warm. "You've sparked a movement, Jonathan, and now it's touching her," she said, nodding toward Melissa. "That's real power." Jonathan shook his head, his fingers brushing the cross. "It's not my power," he said. "It's what love does when we let it lead." His conviction resonated, drawing soft applause from passengers, their faces reflecting hope and admiration. Melissa stood, her hands trembling, her eyes locked on Jonathan. "I grew up thinking faith was about judgment," she said, her voice raw. "But you're showing me something else." Her confession was a turning point, a crack in the walls she'd built. Jonathan nodded, his voice gentle. "That's Jesus. Melissa," he said. "He's not about judgment, he's about love. If you want to explore that, I can point you to him." His offer was a bridge, extended with compassion, and passengers watched, breathless, sensing a transformation unfolding. The cabin erupted in quiet applause, passengers clapping softly, their faces alight with hope. Sarah's eyes glistened, her hand on Melissa's shoulder, guiding her back to the galley as deplaning continued. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing, the crowd at the airport chanting as news of the prayer chain spread. Jonathan stood, his presence steady, ready to face the crowd beyond the gate. Would Melissa cross the bridge he'd offered, or would the weight of her past hold her back? The plane was emptying, but the story was soaring, with the world watching and praying. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight was a sanctuary of hope as passengers slowly deplaned at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Jonathan Roumie, the actor who brought Jesus to life in The Chosen, stood in the aisle of row 3, his wooden cross a quiet emblem against his navy button-down shirt, radiating the faith that had sparked a global movement. Melissa's raw confession. "I grew up thinking faith was about judgment, and her openness to Jonathan's offer to explore faith had shifted the cabin's energy. with passengers clapping softly, their faces glowing with awe. The viral storm, fueled by a clip of Melissa's demand to hide Jonathan's cross, had led to an airline apology, a crowd of supporters at the gate, and a global prayer chain for Melissa herself. Jonathan's 7 words, still unspoken, hung like a beacon, ready to seal this moment of transformation. Would they guide Melissa to a new path, or would the weight of the spotlight pull her back? Jonathan adjusted his carry-on bag, his fingers brushing the cross as he prepared to face the crowd beyond the gate. The news of fans chanting "Faith is freedom," the airline's apology, and the global prayer chain sparked by viewers inspired by his grace played in his mind, a testament to the moment's far-reaching impact. He hadn't sought this platform, but he felt a quiet call to use it for healing, not division. Rachel, the college student who'd shared the viral clip, stood nearby, her phone open to the live stream, her voice hushed with wonder. "They're singing hymns at the airport now. Jonathan," she said, showing him a video of the crowd, led by his co-star Noah James, praying and singing. "This is incredible." Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, slung his bag over his shoulder, his tone a mix of admiration and amazement. "You've started something unstoppable," he said, glancing at his phone, where Bachar Stand with Jonathan posts surged with messages of support. "You're changing lives out there." Jonathan's smile was steady, his voice calm. "It's not me," he said, touching the cross. "It's what faith can do when we live it with love." His words resonated, drawing nods from passengers. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, joined them in the aisle, her voice firm. "You've turned a moment into a movement. Jonathan, don't stop now." In the galley, Melissa stood with Sarah, her hands empty, her face softened by a fragile hope. The passengers' applause for her apology and the news of the global prayer chain had shaken her, a wave of grace she hadn't expected. Sarah's encouragement. "You're not alone in this," had steadied her, but Jonathan's offer to point her to Jesus lingered, a light in the darkness of her shame. She glanced at Jonathan, now standing in the aisle, and felt a spark of courage. Sarah touched her arm, her voice soft. "Go with him." "Melissa," she said, "you've already taken the first step." Melissa nodded, her eyes glistening, and stepped toward the aisle. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, passengers lingering as they gathered belongings, their eyes on Jonathan and Melissa. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, whispered to his seatmate, showing a petition now at 300,000 signatures demanding airline policy reform. "This is history," he said, his voice carrying. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing, Noah's voice audible. "We're praying for Melissa, for healing." Passengers nodded, some typing furiously, others watching Melissa's hesitant approach, sensing a moment of redemption unfolding. Melissa reached Jonathan's side, her voice trembling but resolute. "Mr. Roumie, I meant what I said," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I want to understand faith, not the kind I grew up with, but the kind you live." The cabin fell silent, passengers pausing, their faces reflecting hope and awe. Jonathan turned to her, his expression radiant with compassion. "That's a beautiful start." "Melissa," he said, his voice warm, "Jesus isn't about judgment. He's about love that meets you where you are. I'd be honored to help you see that." His words were a bridge, extended with grace, echoing the chosen role. Then, a new twist shook the moment. Sarah hurried forward, her face alight with urgency, holding her tablet. "Jonathan, Melissa, you won't believe this," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. She showed a breaking news alert. "Dallas church leaders join. The Chosen. Stars cause. Host Prayer Vigil. The article detailed how local pastors, inspired by the viral clip and Jonathan's grace, were organizing a vigil at the airport to pray for unity and forgiveness. Passengers gasped, leaning in to see the tablet. Rachel's eyes widened. "They're calling it a revival," she said, her voice hushed with awe. Melissa's breath caught, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes glistening with emotion. "They're praying for me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After everything." The weight of the grace strangers across the world lifting her up dismantled her defenses. Jonathan smiled, his voice soft but powerful. "That's what Jesus does." "Melissa," he said. "He takes our mistakes and turns them into moments of healing. You're part of that now." His words silenced the cabin. Passengers nodding, some whispering in agreement, others typing to share the moment online. Michael shook his head, his tone awed. "You're turning this into a miracle," he said to Jonathan. "Dr." Simmons stepped closer, her voice sharp but warm. "You've lit a fire, Jonathan, and it's spreading to her," she said, nodding toward Melissa. "That's faith at work." Jonathan touched the cross, his expression humble. "It's not my fire," he said. "It's his." His conviction resonated, drawing soft applause from passengers, their faces reflecting hope and admiration. Melissa stood, her hands trembling, her eyes locked on Jonathan. "I don't know how to start," she said, her voice raw, "but I want to try." Her confession was a vow, a step toward redemption, and passengers watched, breathless, sensing a transformation. Jonathan nodded, his voice gentle. "You start right here, Melissa," he said. "Just say yes to Jesus, and he'll show you the way." He reached into his bag, pulling out a small card with the Chosen logo. "This has info on the show. Watch it with an open heart. It's a start." He handed it to her, his smile warm and inviting. The cabin erupted in quiet applause, passengers clapping softly, their faces alight with hope. Sarah's eyes glistened, her hand on Melissa's shoulder, guiding her back to the galley as deplaning continued. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing, the airport crowd singing hymns as news of the vigil spread. Jonathan stood, his presence steady, ready to face the supporters and media beyond the gate. Would Melissa embrace this new path? Or would the weight of her past pull her back? The plane was nearly empty, but the story was soaring, with the world praying for a new beginning. The first-class cabin of the Chicago to Dallas flight was nearly empty, a quiet testament to the transformative journey that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. Jonathan Roumie, the actor who embodied Jesus in The Chosen, stood in the aisle of row 3, his wooden cross a steadfast symbol against his navy button-down shirt, radiating the faith that had ignited a global movement. Melissa's vow to explore faith, "I want to try," and her acceptance of Jonathan's The Chosen card had left the cabin awash in hope, with passengers clapping softly, their faces glowing with awe. The viral storm, sparked by Melissa's demand to hide Jonathan's cross, had led to an airline apology, a crowd of supporters at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and a global prayer chain for Melissa. Now joined by a church-led vigil for unity, Jonathan's 7 words, finally spoken, sealed this moment of redemption. As he stepped toward the jet bridge, the world waited to see where this journey would lead. Jonathan adjusted his carry-on bag, his fingers brushing the cross as he glanced back at the cabin, where a few passengers lingered, their eyes reflecting gratitude and wonder. The news of fans chanting, "Faith is freedom," the airline's apology, and the Dallas church vigil reported live on Rachel's phone echoed in his heart, a reminder of the moment's boundless reach. He hadn't sought this spotlight, but he embraced it as a chance to point others to love. not division. Rachel. The college student who'd shared the viral clip stood nearby, her phone capturing the final moments, her voice hushed with reverence. "You've changed everything, Jonathan," she said, her eyes shining. "This is a new beginning." Across the aisle, Michael Chen, the tech executive, grabbed his bag, his tone a mix of awe and respect. "You turned a fight into a revival," he said, glancing at his phone, where back her Stand With Jonathan posts surged with messages of unity. "I'm not a believer, but you've got me thinking." Jonathan's smile was warm, his voice steady. "That's all I could ask," he said, touching the cross. "Faith starts with a question, not an answer." His words resonated, drawing a nod from Michael. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the retired professor, joined them, her voice firm. "You've planted a seed, Jonathan. It's growing already." In the galley, Melissa stood with Sarah, her hands clutching the Chosen card, her face softened by a fragile hope. The passengers' applause, the global prayer chain, and Jonathan's grace had dismantled her shame, replacing it with a spark of possibility. Sarah's encouragement. "You're on a new path now," had anchored her, and the thought of watching The Chosen, with an open heart, felt like a lifeline. She glanced at Jonathan, now moving toward the jet bridge, and whispered, "Thank you," her voice too soft to carry but heavy with meaning. Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. "You did it. Melissa," she said, "you chose courage." The cabin was nearly silent, the hum of the plane's systems fading as passengers deplaned, their eyes lingering on Jonathan. A young man in a suit, seated behind Jonathan, whispered to his seatmate, showing a petition now at 500,000 signatures for airline reform. "This is bigger than us," he said, his voice carrying. Rachel clutched her phone, the stream still playing, the airport crowd singing hymns as news of the vigil spread. Passengers nodded, some typing furiously, others whispering prayers, their faces reflecting a shared journey toward hope. As Jonathan stepped onto the jet bridge, a new twist unfolded. A soft chime sounded from Rachel's phone, and she gasped, rushing to catch up. "Jonathan, wait," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. She showed a live update. The Chosen cast announces support fund for faith advocacy. The article detailed how the cast, led by Noah James, was launching a fund to support religious freedom. Inspired by Jonathan's stand, passengers behind them leaned in, catching glimpses of the update. Michael's eyes widened. "Your team's turning this into a legacy," he said, his tone awed. Jonathan read the article, his expression a mix of gratitude and humility. "They're doing this," he murmured, his voice steady but moved. Dr. Simmons joined them, her voice sharp but warm. "You've sparked a revolution. Jonathan," she said, "this is faith in action." Her words were a call to embrace the moment's impact, but Jonathan touched the cross, his voice soft. "It's not my revolution," he said. "It's his." His conviction resonated, drawing quiet applause from the few remaining passengers, their faces reflecting hope and admiration. The jet bridge buzzed with energy, passengers whispering about the fund, the vigil, and Jonathan's unwavering grace. At the gate, the crowd's cheers were audible, a sea of signs reading, "Stand with Jonathan," and "Faith is love." News cameras flashed, reporters poised for his first words. Jonathan paused, taking a deep breath, his fingers brushing the cross. He stepped into the terminal, the crowd erupting in applause, Noah James rushing forward to embrace him. "You did it, brother," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. Jonathan smiled, his voice steady. "We did it," he said, gesturing to the crowd. This is about all of us. Melissa, still in the galley, watched from the plane's window, her hands clutching the chosen card. Sarah stood beside her, her voice gentle. "You're part of this too, Melissa," she said. "You took the first step." Melissa nodded, her eyes glistening, a quiet resolve forming. "I'm going to watch the show," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I want to know what he means by love." Her words were a vow, a new beginning born from a moment of grace. The terminal was alive, the crowd singing hymns, reporters shouting questions. Jonathan faced them, his voice calm but powerful. "This isn't about one flight," he said, his 7 words finally spoken. "Faith is love that never hides." The crowd roared, cameras flashing, as his words echoed the heart of his stand. Noah stood beside him, the cast's fund announcement amplifying the moment. Passengers from the flight: Rachel, Michael, Dr. Simmons joined the crowd, their faces radiant with pride. Weeks later, Melissa watched The Chosen with her sister. The card Jonathan gave her, now a cherished keepsake. A message arrived on Jonathan's Instagram: "I'm starting to see Jesus differently. Thank you." He smiled, his fingers brushing the cross, knowing one heart had shifted. The prayer vigil grew into a global movement, with churches uniting for faith and forgiveness. Jonathan continued his work, his stand on that flight, a quiet legacy, pointing millions to love. The story ended not with a clash, but with a dawn, a new horizon where faith and grace prevailed.